Improving Performance of Innovations. We're glad you could join us for our second of 4 online events, Defining and Meeting Expectations of Investors. Now, please help me in welcoming our moderator, Dr. Luke Samuel, Global Director, Technology Transfer at AgriThority.
Good morning and welcome to the second online Exceed the Seed event of 2021. First, if you have any technical issues or questions during this symposium, please let us know. We will be monitoring any of your needs throughout the hour. You can message via the online chat within Teams. You can email us at info@agriauthority.com, or please call us at 1-816-891-0916. To ensure the quality of our content, we pre-recorded our speakers, but please interact with us via the chat function, and we will get to as many of those questions as possible during the Q&A in the final 15 minutes of the hour. We will also be posting speaker contact emails for networking or follow-up beyond our time slot today. My name is Luke Samuel, and I'm the Global Director of Technology Transfer at AgriThority. Technology, agronomy, product development, and leadership are not only my work, but also my passion. Throughout my career, I have strived to deliver quality results that drive both customer success and company revenue. On behalf of our global team at AgriThority, thank you for joining us for the second hour of our 4-part series about improving performance of innovations. We have a great lineup of speakers today, and we're going to be addressing the topic of defining and meeting the expectations of investors. To kick off our session, we welcome our own Dr. Brian Huseman. Brian is the AgriThority Manager of Regulatory Services and Animal Agriculture. Brian's going to address how to match the expectations to realistic timelines. Brian focuses on continuing to expand regulatory and developing business within the animal health sector, and he has owned regulatory consultancy since 2018 after 10 years as Vice President and Director of Regulatory Affairs at Seva Bimune. He also spent 13 years in regulatory roles at Intervet and Schurling Plow, among others. He received his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine and Master of Science in Surgery and Medicine from Kansas State University. Please help me welcome Brian Huseman.
Hello, I'm Dr. Brian Huseman, Manager of Regulatory Services and Animal Agriculture for AgriThority, headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri, USA. It's a pleasure being here at the second Exceed the Seed 2020-2021 event. Today we're discussing matching expectations to realistic timelines as we move innovations in either the crop or animal health industries to market. We'll also specifically look at the regulatory considerations and the timelines for import and export to government regulations. Research generates new, innovative ideas, but to transform a great idea into a great product, a solid and rigorous product development process is critical. Where new products often fail is in the lack of planning for product development. Depending upon the technology and proposed markets, the pathway and timelines towards commercialization will vary. Planning is a responsive and dynamic action that brings focus to uncertainty. The absence of product development planning with all of the components often leads to a rush or poorly executed in the critical development steps. Let's consider these steps that require discipline and focus, but in a responsive and dynamic way. At AgriThority, we apply our prescriptive response development process to help move innovations to the market. Technologies in agriculture, whether they're animal or plant-based, don't just go from the lab to adoption by producers. The learning process extends from your discovery through early and late development all the way to the product launch and beyond. It is the accumulation of necessary knowledge to move through the development stages. You'll notice regulatory is happening simultaneously alongside scoping, early development and late development. It can be very intensive and a lengthy process and should be planned for accordingly. Through our extensive global network, we can support the strategic planning as well as the implementation. We offer to guide our clients through the regulatory mazes and offer realistic timelines according to the state, regional, and national laws. Starting with scoping and early development, we're answering questions and gathering background information to be prepared. This isn't a stage that should be rushed through. This is the foundation of the product, and realistically, this is where the product regulations start. Defining the regulatory requirements, whether it be USDA, FDA, or EPA in the US, or similar agencies in other target countries. What's the level of proof required and the mandatory elements for registration? What type of studies will be required? What's the timeline look like for the reviews and the approvals? In many instances, the regulatory process is the time-defining component and the limiting factor. So all of the other steps must be organized around it. All those questions should be addressed through a few well-designed studies conducted in a very controlled environment. Many treatments in a few locations for crops or testing animal products in the lab for specific use. The goal for early development is to reduce the number of variables around your product concept, making sure the potential labeling usage is robust enough to face the challenges and variability of the labeled usage and the species. This stage of the process can take months or even years with many variables to consider. When ready, the product can move into late development to be tested in an increased number of environments for plants or in clinical trials for animals. In this stage, the new technology is now formulated with dosage or use rates and ready for increased exposure in real situations or environments. This stage is testing the predicted final label for the best performance management. Make sure it works and how it works best. During this stage, getting producers' experiences within the regulatory guidelines, of course, can move the product closer to adoption. Producers listen to other producers. When technically ready, the product also must have the regulatory freedom to operate with a clear go-to-market strategy. Planning for a successful launch requires many elements to come together. The regulatory process starts in the scoping stage and moves along in parallel to scoping. Early development and late development, just as for product formulation, rate and best uses are defined. Even more important with new technologies is the learning and evolving the technical with the regulatory parameters. Regulatory planning is not the last step of the development process, but getting the label approved provides the freedom to operate to do large-scale trialing necessary before launch. In closing, as you may know, I don't have all the answers, but I do know the timelines for technology development vary greatly, especially when regulatory requirements are evolving. But our recommendation is to define a rigorous development process and proceed with discipline. At AgriThority, we listen, we lead, and we deliver through extensive development capabilities around the world. We customize our product, market or development services to fit the client's needs and market demands around the globe. Above all, our goal is success for our clients. Thank you for your time today, and please contact us if you would like to discuss further.
Brian, thank you. It is so true that a disciplined approach prior to commercialization is so important to help that product launch be much more smooth and successful. Our next speaker is Garrett Stoger. Garrett is a partner at Verdant Partners and a lifelong agriculturalist. Garrett joined Verdant Partners in 2009 as an associate. His initial role with the firm was project support, market research, and financial analysis. Garrett was promoted to senior associate in 2013, taking much more of an active role in new business development and transaction management. After proving his capabilities to successfully source and complete M&A transactions, he became a partner in the firm in 2015. Garrett is also a certified valuation analyst, providing a full range of business valuation services and a member of the National Association of Certified Valuation Analysts. Garrett is also very active across several different food and agricultural industry trade organizations. Please help me welcome Garrett Storger.
Thank you for that kind introduction. To begin, I'd like to thank the team at AgriThority for the opportunity to present on this installment of their Exceed the Seed program. It is a great honor and privilege to address this audience. Today, I've been asked to share some insights on a topic that is core to what we do at Verdant Partners, managing M&A processes. As a group, we represent the interests of buyers and sellers, including private and public companies, across the food and agribusiness value chain. Some of the most frequently asked questions that we receive when talking with new potential clients is, number one, how do I start? Number two, what should I expect? And number three, how long is this going to take? Today, I intend to touch on all three of these aspects of the M&A process. For starters, and generally speaking, there are more things that a seller must do in advance to prepare for a transaction than a buyer. And while it is most common for our clients to call us once they've already made the decision to sell, there are a handful of steps they should consider taking well in advance to ensure that the process goes well and that the valuation of their business is maximized. The following questions are self-assessments to determine how well prepared you might be to sell your business. First is future-proofing. Simply stated, if something were to happen to you today, what would happen to the business tomorrow? And doesn't any employee, a customer, or a supplier have the ability to thwart the sale process? You should establish a team so that the business is not singularly dependent on any one person or relationship. Up next is organization and timing. How well sorted is the business for someone to examine and consider an investment at this moment? Are you organized? Are your records well organized? Do you have all the material contracts signed? And are you sure that the timing is right for your employees to pursue such an endeavor? Remember, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Next up is financial health and records. Has the business recently experienced an unusually bad year or set of circumstances that impedes its financial condition? Are the financial statements prepared and organized in an acceptable fashion? Also, be sure to prepare attainable and defensible financial forecasts with realistic assumptions. Your assumptions will be challenged. Next up is IP matters. Is your business's value principally built upon proprietary intellectual property? If so, is it adequately protected and free and clear of infringements or challenges? Next is core deal team. Have you aligned yourself well with competent professional advisors to guide you in this process? Your success or failure in a transaction is directly linked to the relative strength of your advisors. Be sure to hire an experienced M&A advisor, lawyer, and tax accountant to advise you. And lastly, what about your own commitment and expectations? Do you really want to sell, and are you being realistic about the valuation expectations of your business? Are you emotionally prepared to let go? And what is the benchmark for deciding whether you sell or do not sell? When it comes to the actual process, there are certain aspects of an M&A transaction that need to be considered and expectations that need to be set. These will have similarities and differences for both buyers and sellers, with some overlap, but not necessarily agreement. For sellers, there are three things that generally take the focal point. First, timeline. How long is it going to take? Second, valuation. How much is my business worth? Number three, tax consequences. How much is the government going to take? In addition to this, as the process moves forward, other items might become more front and center, including risk factors and mitigation. Who is on the hook for what? And how much exposure do I have? Working capital. How do we settle up at closing for a business cycle that's continuous? And last, transaction costs. How much is this going to cost me? Each of these elements can derail the process, but having a clear understanding of what to expect going into the process will limit the possibility for surprises. For buyers, their consideration is generally different, but with some similarities. First, for buyers, is deal sourcing. Where is my next deal going to come from? Number two, valuation. And this also flies in the face of return on investment for buyers. How much is the market paying for businesses, and how much of this can I recoup in terms of my investment? And number three, risk assessment. How do I ensure I'm not inheriting a problem? Beyond these immediate considerations, buyers typically then consider the following deal aspects at later stages of the process, including due diligence. And do they have expertise in-house to investigate the opportunity, or will they need to seek external advisors? Working capital. How do we settle up? The same question that sellers have, and this is often a point of contention. Integration planning. After the dust settles and you've bought a company, now what? How do we ensure that the value is captured and preserved? While there is no perfect roadmap for the M&A process, and sometimes you should simply expect the unexpected, I advise clients to keep the following 6 themes in mind throughout the process to keep on track. Number 1, Start with the future story and remain focused on what brought the parties together in the first place. Number 2, prevent deal fatigue by keeping a steady pace and avoiding incessant negotiations on immaterial items. Number 3, develop and implement a post-acquisition integration strategy that is light touch and preserves the culture of the company. Number 4, be mindful of how the opposing party will receive your list of requests. Number 5, include key management. Make sure the process is invisible to your customers and vendors. And number 6, communication is key. Ensure that there is no breakdown between the stakeholders and the employees of the company. When it comes to timeline for the M&A process, it's important to first understand that no two deals are alike, and therefore the pace of the assignment is hard to predict. That said, the following is a reasonable estimate of key milestones and accompanying duration of each. Under the preparatory phase, this includes defining the scope of the investment opportunity, gathering information on the subject business, and creation of all the various marketing materials. This will take generally 2 to 3 months. The marketing phase is where we're actually starting the selling process and buyers are contacted. The numbers of parties contacted will depend on the deal size, and the actual list of prospective acquirers is fully approved by the client. Depending on the timing of management presentations, this process generally takes 3 months. And lastly is the transaction phase. Assuming the market shows an expression of interest in the opportunity and non-binding offers are received, the seller will decide whether or not they go forward in the process. The pace of this process is most variable of any of the phases, but in general it takes 3 to 4 months, meaning that the total time of an M&A project is between 9 and 10 months in total. From our experience, the smaller the deal, the longer the timeline. And with that, hopefully you now have a clear understanding of the M&A process, including how to answer, how do I start, what should I expect, and how long is it going to take? It's been a true honor and privilege to present to you today, and I'd like to once again thank the entire team at AgriThority for making this opportunity possible. I look forward to the Q&A session at the end of the panel.
Garrett, thank you for that great insight and for those key recommendations for the M&A process. Knowing how long the process can take really eliminates so much guesswork and anxiety for both the buyers and the sellers. Next, we want to introduce Randy Riley. Randy is a president and co-owner of Golden Sun Insights. Before coming to Golden Sun, Randy was the director of produce merchandising and procurement at Kroger. He has had an extensive career across the produce industry and has worked in several different capacities, including produce clerk in a retail store, produce coordinator, produce buyer, promotional planner, and category manager. He believes following consumer trends in the industry is imperative to success across the broader produce marketplace and is passionate about sharing his knowledge with others in the industry through both speaking engagements and conversations. Please help me welcome Randy Riley.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today, and it's good to be with you all, even if it is virtually. So I am Randy Riley, co-owner of Golden Sun Insights. And as many of you are aware, our core business is to provide support to our clients who span from seed to retail, all in the fresh produce supply chain. This support involves strategy, business development, analytics, and marketing services. And we also work with several investment companies on these same services. Previous to Golden Sun, I was with the Kroger Company, most recently leading their produce operation that included category management, sales planning, and procurement. So the plan today is to cover controlled environment agriculture. And as investors, gaining insight on this super trend in the produce industry is imperative, and would like to discuss where the industry is headed. So at a high level, the purpose of CEA, as we'll call controlled environment agriculture, is to build facilities that will transform the production, the distribution, and the marketing of fresh fruits and vegetables over a duration in time, all in the spirit of achieving initiatives such as local sustainability and the surety of supply. You know, over the past 5 years or so, there's been over $3 billion invested in controlled environment agricultural companies. And we know that there are 3 main types of models. There's vertical farms that we hear a lot about in press releases. There's container farms, and then there's the standard greenhouses. As with any industry, there will be winners and those that don't win. It's our belief that the winners are the ones that can run with the low-cost model where automation will also be key. At Golden Sun, we have 3 clients in the controlled environment agricultural space, so we know this space well, and we want to talk a little bit about it, but we'll start with the retailers. So there has been increased interest from retailers in CEA for a handful of reasons. When you think about retail and food service buyers, they continue to seek simplified and streamlined supply chains. As retail becomes more competitive, and in some ways more complex, retail buyers are seeking simplicity, and they're associating simplicity with CEA. They're also being challenged to reduce waste and to improve in-stocks while maintaining broad assortments. And CEA offers a significant competitive advantage in their minds, as they are often located within 1 to 4 hours of a retailer's distribution point. Another point of interest is that local production and controlled environments lead to a more resilient, traceable, and trustworthy supply chain. And in the age of food safety awareness, this is huge. In terms of cost of goods, technology and operational advancements drive improvements to CEA unit economics that can compete with or potentially beat outdoor production. And also, CEA has the ability to usher in the next wave of biodiversity, nutrient density, and even flavor innovation, providing retailers with the differentiation they're looking for and quality products. When you think about the end consumer, CEA has also been on the rise due to changing consumer preferences and demands. See, consumers are looking for more locally grown fruits and vegetables for a variety of reasons. We've seen from COVID a big push to support local businesses and farmers who are facing tough times, but local has been cool and trendy for some time now. And CEA offers new perspective on this trend that are attracting consumers. One perspective is that there is a perceived higher quality and freshness from produce that is grown in your backyard, so to speak. Another perspective is flavor. Currently, flavor ranks at the top of consumer preferences and has become one of the distinguishing factors that make a superb vegetable or fruit variety stand out from the broad lookalikes. And then CEA has lower potential contamination from land animals or birds. Their water source is more controlled and frequently tested, and CEAs also have indoor harvesting operations that give them a greater ability to control the work environment as compared to outdoor operations. And in some cases, CEAs have been able to automate their harvest operation fully, eliminating any human contact throughout the growing or harvesting process. And so all of these points appeal to the consumer with their increased interest in this industry. So when you think about where CEA is today in terms of products and assortment, we know the top players in the space today are tomatoes, leafy greens, and fresh herbs. Little fun fact, today, more than 60% of all fresh tomatoes consumed in the US are grown in controlled environments. And that number approaches the 100% mark during the North American winter. Leafy greens, it's a category that continues to grow with more and more greenhouses popping up all over the US with investment money pouring in. There's not a week that goes by we don't read a press release around leafy green controlled environment agricultural companies. And as mentioned before, over the past few years, there has been over $3 billion invested in this space. And fresh herbs, including basic chives or parsley, mint, or thyme, or any other item, it's very popular to grow in controlled environments. And so the future of CEA looks bright for other produce items. Currently, strawberries are the most common berry crop grown by controlled environment agricultural operations, and the market appears to be growing substantially. According to one industry magazine, the number of growers producing strawberries are increasing by 20% year over year. Experts in the industry say that products like strawberries that provide the same or better taste as field-grown product, but last longer, are primed to disrupt the market. Where CEA is headed is also dry veg. When you think about these 3 items, yellow squash, zucchini, or eggplant, the biggest complaint from retailers and consumers is the inconsistency in size or color or even the surety of supply. And those that are exploring how to grow this stuff in a controlled environment are focused on those three attributes. And CEA is also headed down the road of melons. Now, this is new and exploratory, and we're working with the group to potentially build this out. But in order to reduce the logistical disadvantages in terms of cost or surety of supply, there is a lot of interest from folks in trying to achieve melons in an indoor controlled environment standpoint. Hopefully you found that interesting, and I appreciate the time. I'm Randy Riley with Golden Sun Insights. Thank you.
Randy, thank you for that great information on controlled environment agriculture. There is so much opportunity to both simplify and streamline supply chains, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the future holds in this space. Finally, our last speaker of the day is Carl Casale, Senior Agricultural Partner with Osprey Ag Science. Carl is focused on identifying and investing the next generation of agricultural production technologies. His vision is helping provide both affordable food in a sustainable manner. And a key driver is really how to accelerate farmer adoption of these new technologies and practices. Carl brings over 3 decades of experience leading globally influential companies across the food and agricultural sectors. Please help me welcome Carl Casale.
Well, hello, and today it's great to be part of Exceed the Seed. And I'd like to talk about accelerating farmer adoption of new technologies and practices. And as both a venture capital investor and a farmer, I think I've got a pretty unique perspective or view on both the very front end of the process as well as the very back end of the process. And there's obviously a lot of differences, between what the requirements are of making a venture capital investment and what there are for a farmer to adopt new technology. But there are, I would say, probably more similarities than there are differences, and some very key points that are required for both investing as well as adopting new technology on the farm. And for me, it's very simple. There's 4 key questions that need to be answered before anybody would want to make an investment in a company and before a farmer would want to use the technology that's basically being offered. So the first question is basically, what does it do? How does it do it? Where does it do it? And ultimately, why does this matter? And again, not super complicated, but it's amazing, how often people forget that these boxes must be checked along the way, or you're really not going to have a viable product concept. So again, what does it do? How does it do it? Where on the farm does it do it? And why does it matter? And I'll give an example of kind of these 4 critical questions that actually occurred in a conversation I had at a conference where early stage ag tech companies were basically pitching for Series A investment, which is early stage. It goes seed, A, and then B, C, D, or whatever is necessary. And so basically, this was a plant growth stimulant. We've all seen and heard of those. Many of them are quite good and work. But when I asked the question of, well, what does it do? Well, it stimulates plant growth, and it has a chitosan-like mechanism in it. Well, anytime somebody has to use the word "like" to describe what their product is doing, it tells me they probably have not very well qualified what their project actually does. So I said, well, then, how does it do it? And the answer literally was, well, we're not sure. Okay, so you're describing something that works like something, and you really can't tell me how it works like something. So pretty concerning at this point in time. And I said, well, where does it fit on the farm? And they said, well, basically, since it's a plant growth stimulant, it's going to work on basically every variety across your farm that you've got. Now, I understand the power of deduction, and that might be a reasonable conclusion if there was data to support the base premise that was being made. And then the last question was, of course, well, then why does this all matter to me? When they said, well, almost with a tone of, well, you dummy, if you're promoting plant growth, you're going to get more fruit buds. And if you get more fruit buds, you're going to get higher yields. And therefore, this is what you should go do. So that's about 3 leaps of faith in a row that are required to get from point A, to the endpoint, point D, with no data to support basically any of those mechanisms along the way. And, I knew better because, by the time they said it works like something, I was pretty well checked out at that point in time. But, I had to ask the next question was, well, do you have data to support these claims? And the answer was, and we've all seen this, pulled out a really nice brochure and said, well, here's the farmer testimonials of farmers that are really, really happy with it. Now, we all know that that might be great, but a handful, 5, 10, I don't care if it's 100 farmer testimonials. There was no controls. There was no experimental design. There was no rigor that was basically provided at all to generate that information. And I don't use that word by coincidence. There's a difference between information and data, right? They were presenting some information to me and presenting it as data when it really wasn't that at all. So, the bottom line is, testimonials cannot replace data sets, and data sets replicated and presented transparently are both what investors and farmers are looking for, as they both look to mitigate risk in the decisions that they're going to make and to create value. And that is the fundamental point as both an investor and as a farmer that's critically important to me. Now, on the investment side, there's lots of other things that we need to understand. Can you protect your intellectual property? Can you manufacture this cost effectively? But if it doesn't work, or they can't prove that it works, then none of those other questions really matter. You can just move on to kind of what the next opportunity is. So you got to answer those questions really, really well. And that's what's going to generate the interest in terms of farmers wanting to try new things, investors wanting to basically invest in new companies. Really, why it all matters is it's about creating value for farmers. And what's really interesting, and I was thinking about that earlier today, the investment and development process start at the beginning and go all the way to the end, right? Start with an idea, I'm going to test it, I'm going to get it registered if that's required, I'm going to take it to a farmer. But unless it ultimately creates value for a farmer at the end, none of this matters. So in that respect, it's working your way backwards from the farmer all the way back to research to understand, what is going to work here. The knowledge of and discipline and assistance in understanding, here's where you use this product on your farm. It will not work everywhere. It might work on sandy soils with 0 to 3 organic matter, which might be your river bottom ground, which means you probably don't want to try this on your hilly knobs. I'm just making that up. But to understand exactly where it's going to fit adds a lot of value to a farmer. But if you also think about it from an experience standpoint, and this is what I could never figure out, because again, it's fairly intuitive. If I don't understand how something works or exactly what its function is, then how do I know where to place it? And so then it's random. It's literally throwing the dice every time you sell it to a customer. And there's going to be some customers that have a great experience if they try it on their right farm or perhaps right part of the farm in the right year, whatever that set of complexities or variables are that basically drive performance. But that's a huge risk, right? That's a huge risk, for a company to present to a farmer. That's a huge risk for a farmer to take, because it's literally throwing the dice every time you apply that product, because you just don't know for sure or with any high probability of where it's going to work. I liken that to, you go to the doctor's office and you're waiting to see the doctor to be diagnosed. And before you even get in to see the doctor, a physician assistant or somebody comes out, hands you a big bottle of antibiotics and says, here, go take this, you're going to feel great. Now, if I had a raging sinus infection and I take those antibiotics and it was a bacterial infection, I probably feel pretty good about what just happened. If I have some kind of a viral infection and the antibiotic's not going to touch it, I'm not going to be very pleased with the prescription that I was given, because there was no diagnosis. And that's exactly the same in developing new technologies and the critical role that informed development takes, because they can narrow down all the possibilities to here's exactly where this product should fit and where you should go ahead and use it. And when you do that, you're maximizing value for the farmer, because they have a much higher probability they're going to see really good results. You're maximizing value for the company that sold that to the farmer, because they're going to have a repeat customer, and word of mouth is going to spread, and that's going to become their best branding. And if you're an investor that invested in that company because the company could profile exactly where it fit and demonstrate that fit, then you're going to be happy as well. And obviously the converse is true. If it's totally random, it's not 1 in 10 where an investor is going to be successful if that diligence hasn't been done on the front side. So again, creating value and mitigating risk are the most important things for both an investor and a farmer. And without really good, and I can't emphasize this enough, high quality, replicated data sets over a broad area and a period of time to basically demonstrate that, to give the farmer confidence to try it on their farm is absolutely important. The last point that I would leave folks with, particularly those that are starting a business, I totally respect that what you have invented, you're incredibly proud of, and you believe every farmer will benefit from using it. And I absolutely believe that to be true. I also believe there are many people like you that have done the same thing and have the same belief about their product. Now, individually, obviously, there's one of each of you. Collectively, there's hundreds, okay? As an individual farmer, I don't have time to talk to hundreds of people. I have to talk to my trusted advisor, and I have to have some screening mechanism that basically sets my priorities of what we're going to try on our farm. And because farming cycles have become so compressed, I don't have the time, and nor will I have a 5-year development cycle or trial cycle on my farm. I may try it once and then use it on my entire farm, or I may just try it on my entire farm if I believe the potential benefit associated with the use of that product is greater than the potential risk associated with using it. And risk is pretty narrowly defined. What is the possibility that the use of this technology caused my yield to decline? Because I raise perennial crops, I raise blueberries. If the answer is, that's interesting, I never really thought about it this way. If there were a 10% probability that it could lower my yields because of my high fixed costs, I don't know what the value proposition that I would accept on the other side in terms of gain would be that would cause me to go do that. And that's called asymmetric risk reward. For very high value crops, the risk of using a technology is far greater than the potential reward. But if somebody can demonstrate to me and I've got confidence in it, then I will adopt very, very quickly for the opposite reason there. So, again, data really matters. You can't short circuit it. You can't find enough new customers to replace the ones that you offended before, because this world is so small. You're going to run out of new customers before you have to go back and talk to the old ones. And farmers have a really long memory. Last thought I would leave you with in terms of why risk management is so important to farmers. And I was actually talking to one yesterday in Iowa. He's a 4th generation farmer, as am I, and very proud of that. And I think about it probably a little differently because I think about it as a business, and I bear some burden of legacy, but not a lot. There's a lot of farmers that are incredibly proud of being the 4th generation, and they should be, because there aren't very many businesses that make it to the 4th generation. And they don't want to be known as the one who lost the farm so it couldn't go to the 5th generation. So farmers are naturally risk averse. Most times they stay in business by the bad decisions they avoid, much more so than the good decisions that they make. And so being able to prove value to them and the fact that the risk has been mitigated, and the best way is to identify exactly where it works and where it doesn't, then that's, I believe, the path to success. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to answering some questions. Take care.
Thank you, Carl. That was a great presentation about accelerating farmer adoption of new technologies. Data is a critical component of this, not only for the farmers to understand, but also investors to understand the full value of these products as they are launched into the commercial marketplace. Thank you again for your presentation. And a huge thank you to Brian, Garrett, Randy, and Carl for all your insightful presentations. In just a few moments, we'll open up the chat for any questions, and we look forward to hearing from our presenters during this Q&A session.